So the reason why I'm giving this lecture is that last year we had a project here in Kyrgyzstan that was focusing on so-called piloting of this system of environmental economic accounting in the Kyrgyz Republic. And that was a project that was partly funded by local UNDP, partly by Czech UNDP. And it was a one-year project during which we had two tasks. It was to try to compile these pilot accounts for a very small area in Kyrgyzstan called Kizil-Ungur. It's in the Jalabad region, and what's special about it is that it's the world's biggest walnut forest. It's actually the only natural walnut forest on the planet. So it's very special. It's a very valuable natural area, and also what's special about it is that it provides local people with basically everything they need for their everyday life, and also it has a huge tourism sector. There are a lot of tourists coming and utilizing this landscape. So it's quite a nice area to try this pilot ecosystem accounting, because obviously there are a lot of economic products that are produced in the area, and obviously all of them are based on the natural capital that is present there in the area. So this was a nice example to see what is the contribution of the nature towards all these things that are produced within the local economy. And that's what we are doing. So basically out of this structure of accounts, we were focusing on those which we were able to compile based on the data that were available. And then from yesterday's lecture, you know that data is this basic stepping stone which you can't basically do without. So we were looking at two types of ecosystems, at forest and at pastures, which are the most important types of land use in that area. And then we were looking at two types of ecosystem services, at provisioning services and at regulating services. And now you guys tell me what's the difference. Do you remember from yesterday, or the previous lectures you definitely had with this course?
Food, production, water, fiber, food.
Yes, provisioning services are those tangible things, yes, exactly, that we derive from ecosystems. And then regulating services.
Climate regulation, flood regulation.
For example, those are the services that make our environment good for life, that are saving us from erosion, saving us from floods, saving us from disasters, basically. So those are the services that make our environment friendly for life. And we were looking at two particular services, at non-timber forest products, all the non-timber products that people take from the forest and that they're utilizing, which are walnuts, which are fruits, which is grass for cattle, and so on and so on. And we were looking at climate regulation. That means how much carbon from the atmosphere is taken by the vegetation every year. And I don't know how much you guys know about climate change. Did you have any basic course about climate change and about carbon cycling? Mm-hmm. Yeah? So you kind of know? Okay, great. So that means that you know that the more carbon we take from the atmosphere to the vegetation, the better for us, because the less carbon we have in the atmosphere, the less greenhouse effect we have, right? So basically the growth of the forest and taking up of carbon is actually very beneficial for global atmosphere. So as you can see, some of these services are important for local people, such as these non-timber forest products, and some of the services produced by this very small area are actually important for the global society, such as climate regulation. So that's just to say that there are multiple scales to which ecosystem services contribute. And then, so what we were doing, we were engaged with a lot of stakeholders here in Kyrgyzstan, with the National Statistical Committee, with local experts, as Rahat and other people from the university and other sides, and from national agencies and from ministries, and we were trying to map which data we have available and what we can actually calculate. And then also we were consulting with the stakeholders which knowledge is required for this CIEA. We were giving them this introduction that probably I'm giving to you today, and we were trying to figure out how they can collaborate and which data they can share so that they were able to do this accounting on multiple levels. And that actually turned out to be quite a nice process, and we probably learned more than the stakeholders, but, but definitely it was a learning process for everyone. And this is something what you saw already. So based on all these conversations we had and the workshops and the work with the pilot accounts, we came up with some conclusions about the situation here in Kyrgyzstan regarding natural capital accounting and CAEA. And you've seen this already, so you know that the strengths are on the side of like capacity and people involved and local expertise and the interest in the process. And the weaknesses are on the side of data and on the side of collaboration between institutes, which is sometimes limited. So those are the things that need to be like enhanced in order to be able to perform this. And why are we doing this, or why we want this, is that we already know from yesterday that this process of natural capital accounting is beneficial for monitoring for SDGs, is beneficial to contribute to multiple international obligations that Kyrgyzstan has, and also is beneficial because it teaches us like how sustainable is the development that we are having here in this country or in other country. So it informs us about like how much natural resources we're using, if we are depleting them or not, and if the way we're using our natural capital is sustainable. That's why we're doing it. Yeah. Okay, guys. So where I would like to get today is that I would like you to participate in this like demo version of compiling these accounts. They told me that it would be probably too difficult to like want you to really compile the accounts yourself. So we'll just participate in this exercise together, and we'll try to understand what's going on there, so that you guys have a practical idea of like what it means to do these accounts, right? To do that, you will need to understand a few more terms. So let's go through them briefly, so that all of us are on the same page, right? Before that, please remind me how much time we have left.
15 minutes?
50.
55. Fantastic, okay. Because 15 would be scary, but 50 is alright. Okay. So, the first term that we learned yesterday already is ecosystem services. So, what's important about it, I think it's kind of intuitive that everyone knows what ecosystem services might mean. Those are all the goods and services that we are using from natural ecosystems, and we are consuming them. We already know that that's food, that's water, that's this regulation of erosion and floods, and also those are the intangible things, such as cultural enjoyment or like spiritual pleasure that we are deriving from being in the nature. And all these things somehow contribute to our well-being, right? So, if we think of some example ecosystem service, let's say, okay, provision of crops, right? Agricultural production. So, so that we can derive the crops, like maize or wheat or whatever, from the fields. It's not just enough to wait at the field and wait what happens, wait if there is some crops coming, because nothing is coming, obviously. So the nature itself is just not enough. It won't provide us with the goods and benefits just like that. We also need some kind of input from human side, from the society, right? We need labor, we need capital, we need machinery. And when we combine these two inputs, the input from the nature and the input from the society, then together we are creating these benefits, such as the agricultural products. And those are the things that we are actually using. So what I want you guys to remember, and probably it's easier for people involved in economics than for people from other backgrounds, is that ecosystem services are only part of these final benefits. It's important to always keep in mind that when we want to enjoy these benefits, such as food or water or recreation or whatever, we always need to keep in mind that there is a contribution of these ecosystem services from nature, and there is this contribution of humans' labor and humans' capital and so on. Yeah? So two things always. But why we are interested in this is because we want to live in a high-quality way. Yeah. So our ultimate goal is to live in a good way. That's why we need all these benefits. Yeah. Okay. This is something that you saw already yesterday, right? This is another version of basically the same as I was just showing. So we already know that we are really dependent, that we in the end consume. In this case, it was this illustration by pastures and by grazing and by the animal products that we are consuming in the end. And also we need to keep in mind that there is this input by human society which is necessary to produce these products. And then this is what you remember from yesterday, right? This is the so-called production boundary, and this is just to illustrate that standard accounting, which you were just mentioning, these balance sheets and costs and benefits and everything. The standard accounting in every economy takes place here. This, the upper part, is the thing that goes into standard national accounting, and that's what is reflected in gross domestic product, in GDP. So our view of the situation from standard accounting in every country is very limited because we are just looking at this half of the picture. While this system of environmental accounting, which I'm just talking about, is introducing also this part and tries to connect these parts together so that we have this full picture of what's going on in the economy and how we're using natural resources. Yeah. And just as a matter of terminology, what we have, the richness of ecosystems and like the stocks of ecosystem that we have, in this terminology are called ecosystem assets. That's the richness we have. Those are the values that we have. That's the tangible stuff, the ecosystems. And then those services that are like flowing from these ecosystems, those are in this terminology called ecosystem service flows. So just to keep in mind that the stocks, also straightforward for economists, the stocks are the tangible stuff, like the richness we have, and the ecosystem services are the flows, those things that are being produced every year or every day, and then like we keep consuming. Does it make any sense? Yeah. Any questions on this? Like, just feel free to interrupt me if something doesn't make sense. Yeah. Okay. And one last piece of terminology. Sorry for that. So, you are already aware of this distinction between ecosystem service and benefit, right? That's what we just discussed. Benefit is the final thing that we are consuming, that's what we enjoy. And ecosystem service is one of the two parts that contribute to that benefit. What is the second part? What was the second part that was contributing to the benefits we're consuming? Let's say that if benefit is the agricultural crops we consume, and the ecosystem service is the growth of these crops, but there is something more we need to generate the benefits. Yes, these things, yeah, the human input. I'm referring back to this, right? Sorry? Yeah, human input in general, yes, human capital, human labor, yeah. I'm sorry, I maybe missed your answer. You were saying?
No, I said labor.
Labor, good, okay. Yeah, so this is what I was wondering about, yeah. So we've got the ecosystem service and we've got the benefits. And now we are going to dig deep into this difference between economics and ecology, let's say, or environment. So this is a way of thinking that actually takes a bit of effort. So guys, let's try to figure out together. So let's say that the ultimate benefit that we are going to talk about is drinking water, right? So that's the end point. We want some water to drink. And then we have maybe two possibilities how to get this water. Either we can buy it in a bottle, or we can drink it directly from this spring in a forest where it just comes up from the earth. Yeah? So the benefit is the same, that's the water. And it's good for us in terms of thirst. But the ways how to get it are twofold. Okay? And then we have just like one ecosystem service, and that's called provisioning of drinking water. And that's one service. The nature does the same thing all the time. It provides us with the water, but there are two types of these benefits, right? So what's the difference? The difference is that if we consume the water directly from the forest, we're just consuming the ecosystem service. There is no human input whatsoever, right? We just come there and drink it. While when we consume this bottled water, there has to be this human input in between, all the pipes, all the wells, all the filtration, all the companies transporting the water somewhere. So this one step in between us bringing the water and the nature producing the water is this economic product, that's bottled water, right? So unlike this first case, there is one step in between. And this terminology becomes very important in environmental economic accounting. And there's a distinction between ecosystem service, the product, and the benefit that people are enjoying. So, previously in this system of national accounting, the standard statistical accounting that takes place in every country since 1950s, and which produces GDP as the major indicator, within this standard accounting, this part of ecosystem services was totally left apart. It was just disregarded. That's why we need a CEA to supplement for this. But where the standard accounting always began was here, this level of products. The standard national accounting just looks at the economy and sees that everything is starting with the products, with bottled water or with packed meat and so on and so on. Do I explain enough? But then we know that this is not true, this is not how it works in the reality. We need to take these products from somewhere. And in standard economic accounting, what's only taken into account is this part, the human input. And the benefits are just measured in terms of this input that was there from the societal side. But in reality, as we know, there are also these ecosystem services that we need to create these benefits. And that's why we are now looking a bit beyond, and we are moving the production boundary a bit further to also incorporate it into our way of thinking. Yeah. Our ultimate goal is to be able to calculate GDP again, but this time not only considering the products and human input, but also the input of nature. Guys, does it make sense? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. And now we're getting to your original question. So how do we do this? How do we merge these two things together? And here we're just coming across a new term, which is called integration, which means that we compile the standard accounts that we have in every country according to system of national accounting. We compile these accounts according to system of environmental economic accounting, this SEA, which, as you already know, is a part of natural capital accounting, which we are talking about in this lecture. So we have two types of accounts, and our task is to combine them together. And of course, these two guidelines provide us with information how to do it. And the exercise I'm talking about, which we're going to do today, is kind of a demo version of this integration, so that you guys see how this whole thing works. Yeah? So, just briefly, this is something which you saw already yesterday, and I just want you to have a look at it again, just to remember what is the process, yeah? So yesterday we said that when we talk about accounts, we basically mean some tables which either describe what is the extent of ecosystems we have in a country, what is their condition, and what is the supply and use of different ecosystem services in a country, yeah? We do this in physical terms, then we transfer it into monetary terms, and then we are on the right track to be able to integrate this information on the ecosystem services into these standard balances that we have in national accounting. So this level here is the one that's directly connected to standard national accounts that we were talking about. Yeah? Okay, so this is just to remember from yesterday. We have some ecosystem external accounts, we have this condition accounts, and then what's mostly important for us right now, we have ecosystem service supply and use table, which tells us from which ecosystem units, such as pasture or forest or water or whatever ecosystem you have in mind, from which ecosystem units we derive which ecosystem services. Yeah. And what's more, when compiling these tables from data we have available, we also are trying to quantify which type of economic units are consuming these services. Yeah. I'll give you examples in a second. But basically, what we can expect from these tables once we compile them is the information, which types of land use provide us with which types of services and how much, of course, and also which type of economic units, and by economic units, I mean, what I mean by economic units. Yes, yes, and also in terms of specific sectors, like let's say households or governmental sector or private business sector and so on. Yeah, and we can even divide further, like talk about fishery sector, agricultural sector, industrial sector, and so on. Yeah, so we can even like try to allocate which type of these economic sectors or units, which type are consuming the services. And now I'm aware that I'm like not complying with the right economic terms, but I'm trying to make it clear. And then, based on that, you have compiled all these basic tables. Yeah, you have compiled the ecosystem extent table, so you already know how much forests you have, how much pastures you have, and so on. You also were able to look at like what is the condition of ecosystems, if the land is degraded or not, if the forests are diminishing or not. Yeah, you know all this. And you also looked at what specific services does the forest provide to local people, and who is actually using these services and how. Yeah. So let's say that all of this work has been already done, and you've got this data. And then, to make things simple, let's say that your ultimate goal now is to go and integrate all this information with your standard national accounting, so that you could see if the information you get from standard national accounting, the standard statistics that you're doing, if the information is like underestimated or overestimated, or if it's right or not. Yeah? So that's what we're going to do. And just to make things simple, we are going to look at two types of products or services. And the first one of them is pretty straightforward, and that's going to be the ecosystem service of timber production. And then the final product that would be furniture. Yeah. So the first type of benefits that we are utilizing from this forest is that we have a place to live at, because we have the furniture, which is the product, and the ecosystem service that's leading to this product is timber provision. Okay? I think that's kind of suited. But then, there is another ecosystem service that we are enjoying every time we come to the forest, and that's air filtration. We are enjoying the fresh air, or cleaner air, that this forest provides us with. Yeah? So there are two types of services, and you can see that unlike this service that we are using directly, and we are enjoying the benefit of fresh air directly, this ecosystem service we are not enjoying directly. You're just not enjoying the timber. You're enjoying the furniture that you're using. Yeah? So there is this economic product. There is this path through which the timber went through the economy, was processed in multiple ways to create this final product of furniture. Yeah? Let's go. So guys, now it becomes pretty complicated. So now you guys need to like think about things properly. Can you see the figures and the letters and numbers, everything? Yeah? Good. So let's look at this hypothetical situation. And this is actually a real like illustration of how the final integration really takes place. Okay? So on the left, you can see some aggregate information about the supply of products and the use of products that's taking place in the economy. Does it look like something familiar from standard national accounting balance sheets? And not that much yet, no problem. But anyway, those are economic products, right? This is something that is taken into account in standard accounting. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So, in the upper part of the table, you can see these different, let's call it economic units or economic sectors that are active in the economy. We have forestry industry. Of course, I'm only going to talk about those sectors that are somehow linked to forests. Yeah? So, we've got forestry industry that works with the timber. We've got manufacturing industry, that's manufacturing the timber. And then we have the final consumers, which are households. Yeah? So basically, this is a very simple example of everyone who can basically, theoretically, come into some contact with the forest and consume something from the forest. We have listed all of them here. Theoretically, you can do this with the whole economy. If you had all the products that are possible to imagine in the economy, you could also list all the hypothetical users of these products, all the industries, or the agricultural sectors, households, governmental sector, and so on. So basically, you could probably make a matrix where everything would be included. In this case, we are just looking at our specific forest and very specific products. So this is standard national accounting. That type of accounting based on which we calculate GDP at present. So you can see that the only thing that's appearing here on the left are basically like ready-made products or like timber that is already logged, furniture that's already made. There is no input, and you can reflect it here. What we have here is this column that looks at this original ecosystem asset, at the ecosystem that we have, and there's nothing in this column. That means that this is totally disregarded in standard national accounting. Yeah? And you can see that where everything begins is actually not the ecosystem, it's forestry industry that is logging the timber, let's say in value of 50 units. And then we have manufacturing industry that's manufacturing the timber and producing the furniture. And then the difference between these two is this, which means that the value added by this actor of manufacturing industry is 30. Does it make sense? Yeah, we logged the timber, we added a value of 50, then we send it to manufacturing industry, which utilize these 50 units from previously, but adds 30 extra in terms of value of things. And we are getting to this ultimate value of 80. You look a little bit confused. Is there anyone who is not confused? Everyone's confused. Okay, so I'll try to go through it once more. So, you can imagine this as a process of like slowly working with the timber from the forest as long as it gets to the final consumers, which are the households, which are people, basically, individuals. Yeah. So you've got some timber that is being logged by forestry industry. Then this timber is sent to manufacturing industry, where the furniture is produced. And then this furniture is sent or sold to households and to people who are enjoying the final benefits. Yeah, this is the process. And this table is broken down into two parts. The first one telling us what was the supply of these products, and then the second part will tell us what was the use of them. And you can always see, which is pretty straightforward, that when something is produced, supplied by, let's say, forestry industry in the first step, it's in the next step used by the next industry. Yeah, so the output of this is seen as input to here. Yeah, so you've got this timber that's flowing basically from forestry industry to manufacturing industry and then to the households. And of course, it's not flowing through these industries just like that. It's flowing through these industries because every other industry adds something to these products, right? So forestry industry sends like raw timber, but then the manufacturing industry turns this timber into the furniture, which means that in economic terms, I'm still showing you, but in economic terms, there is some added value. Yeah, they add something to the original timber. So, if we say that the value of the timber originally was 50, then by the work in this industry, another 30 units were added. So then we are getting to the final value of 80, which is then the price for which the households are buying the stuff. Does it make sense? A little bit more than before? Yes. Okay. So you can see that ultimately from 0 going through the ecosystems, we are getting to 80. Guys, what's super important here is that you see that basically the whole thinking here starts with the forest industry. This type of accounting acts as if everything started in this first industry, and then you're asking, okay, so where did the timber come from? But it's not reflected here. This looks as if the timber just appeared, yeah? And that's why this picture we are getting from this type of accounting is just not complete, because it doesn't reflect the reality, because nothing just appears in the forestry factory, right? What I'm talking about is this production boundary that we mentioned so many times. The production boundary says that in this type of thinking, everything begins here with the forestry industry. And our aim is to move the production boundary, to also look at what was happening before. Yeah? Okay, so we have the next step. I've left the original production boundary here so that you can see where it was. And now you can see that some things appeared extra to what was there before. Because before we only had log timber and furniture. While here we have another service, and that's growth in timber. So we have a few new entries in the table. They are looking one step back and then take us a bit further. So now you can see that these zeros here have disappeared. This is an account that's already taking into account these methods of natural capital accounting and of CAEA. You can see that we have moved the production boundary a little bit to take the ecosystem into account too. And based on economic calculations and some methods we have available, that's actually the work that Rahat has been doing, we can assess that the original contribution of the forest towards this timber that we are using here, the original contribution was 30. Let's say so. Let's say that this was the contribution of the forest, which was then transferred to the forestry industry. Yeah? And that means that this original figure of 50 that we had from the previous account is actually meaning something, which is a totally new information. That means that actually the things have begun much earlier, and that substantial value of these things we are using has been actually created by the nature, which is a totally different way of thinking. Yeah? And then you can see that basically the rest is the same. So the forestry industry added this value of 20, created a value of 50, that went to the manufacturing industry. These guys were working with the timber, they created the furniture, by which they added value of 30, and then this whole thing went to the households, and they consumed it. So the total added value is again 80. Nothing changed. Guys, why nothing has changed? Because we added something, right? We added these ecosystem services. So how come that this final figure is just the same? Well, that's because we basically added some services. But those are services that contribute to these products, the furniture, that already were there in the accounting. So the only thing that we did is that we just divided this value, which was already there, between the nature, I'm simplifying that, but let's take it this way, between the nature and the economy. Yeah? So that's why nothing changed, because all these products we talked about, they were already in the accounting. We just thought about it in a slightly different way. Yeah. Does it make sense more or less? Okay. Because now at this step, you guys should be asking, okay, so what's the difference? Like, why are we doing this whole thing? Because we are getting basically to the same number. And my answer at this point would be, yeah, you're right. At this point, there is no substantial change. But it brings us this information, how much the nature contributed to this. Yeah, it brings us this information that not everything actually started in the factory. It all started in the ecosystem, and then this whole thing would never work without this. Yeah, so it brings us a new mindset. But I'm going to bring it a bit further, right? That's what I just said. So we're going one step further. This is just the same table, but with an additional step now. Because in the beginning, as you remember, we mentioned that this forest that we are taking into account doesn't provide us only with the timber, but also with fresh air, right? That's what we discussed. So now, and this is the this is how the integration, the one we were asking about, works like. So now we are trying to supplement into this way of thinking also those services that weren't there at all in the beginning, which is, in this example, air filtration. And now, when you guys look at the table, and now ignore this, ignore air filtration, look at that. What we had from previously is these 30 units of timber that was growing, sent to the forestry industry, they worked with it, by which they added 20, sent it to the manufacturing industry, they were making the furniture, so they added another 30 unit values, and then send it to the households, who used it for creating. That's the same as it was before, right? No change. But now, we're thinking, okay, so that's for timber. But then we already know that the forest also provides us with fresh air, so where is it? And here it is. So now, based on, again, like some economic procedures of economic valuation, we will figure out, and there is a whole field of methods behind it, we'll figure out that the actual value of this air we're breathing, the fresh air from the forest, is 15 units. Yeah. But that means that now this ecosystem, about which we previously thought here as providing the value of 30, actually provides a value of 45, because this is something that wasn't taken into account at all before. And here you can see that this fresh air is actually not consumed by forestry industry, not even manufacturing industry. It's consumed by the people who go to the forest. Yeah. So we tend to aggregate all these individuals under this household sector. So you can see that this 15 is consumed here. And because this fresh air doesn't contribute to any product that was there already, yeah? It's something totally new. It's something that wasn't captured at all in the original accounting. But now it is, because now we are using, we're moving the production boundary, and we're incorporating also those services that weren't incorporated before. And now you can see that the final value added in this whole chain is 95. It's plus the 15 that wasn't there before. So guys, unlike this ecosystem service of growth in timber, which actually contributes to something that was there in the accounting already, even though it was useful to divide it because we learned that some of the basis comes from the nature. But anyway, unlike this ecosystem service that contributes to something that already is in economic accounting, this ecosystem service is new. That's something that wasn't there in the accounting. And because, so how is GDP calculated? Please shout because I can't hear you.
Logistic consumption plus investment plus government expenditure and plus net export.
right, all these things, yes.
So it's a treatment.
Oh, absolutely. Some additions to that. Yeah. So exactly, it's the sum of these things. And basically, this accounting for products and for added value in the economy, that forms one of the inputs into this calculation, right? So this means, and now going to the integration, this means that this type of thinking and this type of calculations or quantification actually tells you that the ultimate input of this whole process into our GDP is actually higher. It's higher than we thought, because we are taking into account also those things that weren't taken into account before. And again, if you're asking why are we doing that, I'm going back to what I said yesterday in the beginning of the lecture. If we want to pursue sustainable development, if we want to be sure that the way we're living is not detrimental for us and the next generations, we need to make sure that we are using natural resources in a sustainable way. We need to be sure that we are not depleting it. Because we can do it, maybe our children can do it, but then what can happen is that there's like no other children coming afterwards. So the thing is that we need this type of thinking. Although it's like new for us, and although we're not comfortable with that maybe, we need it to be able to make better decisions, to take all these important things into account. So that's why we need this natural capital accounting or experimental ecosystem accounting, to be able to incorporate all these values that are actually stemming from the nature, to be able to incorporate them into this bigger picture. Yeah.